If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on The More Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new weekly television and radio shows.
My guest now is Colin Fry. Colin is a leading psychic medium and healer who is certified with the United Spiritualist Church. Colin uses his spiritual knowledge to help others and is currently on tour in the UK with his new show, The People's Medium. I met Colin after his show in Cardiff. Colin Fry, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Now, Colin, have you always been a medium? Have you always had the psychic ability?
No, I was a small once, and then I grew up and became a medium. No, to be serious, I had the ability right from when I was a small child. But you know, as a child, you know, it's like a lot of things. You know, you can be a naturally gifted musician or artist as a child. You have to grow into an understanding of what you're supposed to do with it. And I think really it was about 15 that I started to understand that it was something I was supposed to be doing something with. And I went into a development circle with the Spiritualist Church, and then started to begin to demonstrate when I was 17. Worked in the Spiritualist movement for many, many years, travelling around, demonstrating and taking services in Spiritualist churches. And then sort of like I suppose the career, if you like, grew and expanded out of that.
Right. So for someone that's never come across a medium before, what is the actual difference between a psychic and a medium?
Right. There's a very easy explanation to this. And first of all, what I would have to actually say, there is nothing wrong with just being psychic. There are some very good psychics who work on the same level as mediums do of trying to use their ability to guide and to help people. But the difference is that all mediums are psychic, but not all psychics are mediums. And if you think of a psychic as being someone who has an extra sensory perception of worldly things, earthly things, but a medium's ability sort of like goes up a notch from that, and that perception then becomes otherworldly things. It's the perception of spirit existence and the life of the existence of the soul beyond earthly existence, the afterlife. Yeah.
So would you say then that you're a conduit between this physical earth and the spirit world?
Oh, very much so, yes. You know, it's, if you like, we give the voice and we embody the communication of people that can no longer do that because they no longer have a physical form. You know?
Yeah. So what would you say then is the difference between being spiritual, like yourself, and being religious? I mean, are they poles apart, or are there some...
Well, I think people get a bit sort of snotty about, oh, I'm very spiritual, you know, and it's, you know, the kids now have a great thing, you know, they say, you know, you can talk the talk, but can you walk the walk?
Yeah.
And, you know, there have been times when I've been to mind, body and spirit festivals and things like that, you know, where there's a lot of talk going on, but not a lot of walking going on. You know, I'm always just slightly suspicious of people that try to portray this very, very spiritual persona, where actually underneath it you actually know that they're probably not like that at all. You know, spirituality is just actually being yourself, trying to be positive, trying to use whatever faculties, gifts, abilities that you have to try to help other people.
Yeah.
Religious, I would say, you know, that I have no beef with any religion. You know, there are many, many paths to God, and you find the one that suits you, or you grow up in the one that suits you, and that's the path that you follow. My only issue with religion is the arrogance of the religions that say, we are the only way. You follow our rules and regulations, or you don't believe in God.
Yeah.
You know, there's a very funny, story of it actually happened to me. I was the first time I went to Ireland. and I demonstrated in Dublin. I was signing the autograph queue afterwards, and the only way I can describe it is a group of very short haircut ladies in Oxfam dresses and a man in a very ill-fitting suit came up to the queue. And I looked up at them and I said, "Good evening, sisters, good evening, father." And this nun leapt forward and she said, "How did you know?" I said, "You don't need to be psychic to work that one out, love." No. And she said, "We're not supposed to be here." I said, "I don't suppose you are." But apparently these nuns were telling me that if the Mother Superior was out the way, they used to turn the television on in the afternoon and watch me on Sixth Sense. And then they found out that their priest was also interested, and they came along to one of my evenings. And I had a little chat with them, and they were very pleasant. And then one of them leant forward and she said, "I have to ask you, Mr. Fry." And I said, "What's that, sister?" She said, "Do you believe in God?" I said, "Yes, I do believe in God." She said, "But do you believe in the Catholic God or the Protestant God?" And it's this, the way that some people feel as though, you know, when they follow a religion, that, you know, it's their God.
Yeah.
And religion should be about God for everybody. You know, it's...
But do you think then the sort of that mainstream religion maybe not looks down on you, but obviously doesn't agree with what you do because it sort of goes against the orthodoxy,
you know,
what they stand for?
Again, you know, please don't think that I'm picking on Catholics because I've got a lot of Catholic friends, but, you know, in my hometown, about 18, 19 years ago, I was invited to be one of the speakers at a forum, which was people from all different religions. There were actually some people from some religions who would not come because I had been asked to be one of the people on the panel. Right. And afterwards, I was chatting to a young Catholic priest who I actually became quite friendly with afterwards. And he was with an older father. And this older priest was quite irate with me. And I said, "Look, you know, Father, with the greatest respect, what is the issue that you have with me?" You know, I said, "All I try to do is to help people." And he went, "It is our responsibility to tell people what to believe." And he said, "You tell people to think for themselves. Within the church, we can't tolerate that." And I said, "Don't you realise just how damning that statement is?" And he just couldn't get it.
Yeah, and how tender that is as well, I suppose, yeah.
You know, and I think that is what spiritualism as a religion, and I always say, you know, spiritualism is my religion, it's my faith. It is the only... A skeptic once said this, and I thought it was such a great thing. He said, "Spiritualism is the only religion that tries to give evidence of what it believes."
Yeah.
Now, he thought that was a skeptical comment, but actually it was a very truthful comment, because I think we probably are the only faith system that does try to give evidence of what we believe. But, you know, it's not for everybody.
Now, you happily worked in retail management for a number of years before, obviously,
what you're doing
now.
I mean, you know, before I turned professional, I had an 18-year career in retail management.
Yeah. So what was that turning point then? What caused you to go full-time with what you're doing now?
I had a very close friend, Michael, who was quite a lot older than me. He was actually a friend of my mother's initially. And he was diagnosed with HIV, and he was raised in Bernardo's home, so he had no biological family. So we had legal documents drawn up so that in the eyes of the law, I could be his next of kin. So it was like an adoption, but we became brothers. Yeah. So, you know, Michael became my brother. I spent 8.5 years looking after him. And his wish for me, or what we used to talk about, you know, I remember one day I got quite angry with him. We were saying, you know, you're going to have to make a decision one day. You know, you're either going to be a manager for the rest of your life, or you're going to use your gift and you're actually going to go full time with it. And I was quite annoyed with him. And I said, you know, I've got a very good career and I've done very well in my career, you know. And he said, yes, but there's going to have to be a turning point. And I always said that I would never go professional as a medium. I was very happy in my job. I liked the company and the family that I worked for. Very nice people. I've still got the greatest regard and respect for them. And then Michael passed away at King's College Hospital. I was with him when he died, when he passed over. And I made a decision there and then, you know, as he faded from this life into the next, I thought, it's time to go out on a limb.
So would you say then, I suppose would you class him as a hidden healer in disguise, in a sense?
Oh, Michael was many things, you know, mostly a clown, but yeah, he had a wisdom of his own, and was a big inspiration to me. So, you know, I made the decision within 5 minutes of him passing. But I just phoned my boss and I said, I'm sorry, I'm not coming back. Yeah.
So I suppose you could say, I mean, we all have very special people that come into our lives, and they're all part of a bigger puzzle, a bigger jigsaw, wouldn't you say?
One of the things that I teach with my students is I try to teach them what I call the fundamental spiritual laws. Now, they're nothing to do with religion, they're nothing to do with spiritualism, they are spiritual laws that govern our existence. Now, most people know the one of cause and effect, or what some people call karma, but there are others, you know, and the one that I often talk about with my students is the law of vacuum. The law of vacuum dictates, in the universe, both physical and spiritual, a vacuum will not be tolerated. That means that if you want something new to come into your life, something has to move out of your life. Now, when you try and explain this to people, they'll often say, well, that means I've got to give things up. You know, I've got to let people go. And there's the fear element in it. If you take the fear element away, and then you recognise that nobody or anything is meant to be in our lives permanently. It has to move on. And this applies to relationships, friendships, family. You know, every person is meant to serve a purpose to everybody else that's in their life, and vice versa. And once you serve that mutual purpose to one another, whether it be part of a life journey, a relationship, a friendship, whatever, even if that moving on is that person passing over, we have to be prepared to accept that, you know, for a new energy to come into our life, an old energy has got to move out and has got to move on and do something else.
Okay, so talking about communication and moving on, how do you communicate with people that have passed on? I mean, how does that work for you? Is it visions?
I don't. They communicate with me. And this is the mistake that a lot of people make about mediums. They think that you can walk into a room and we can just summon up whoever, you know, they want. And it doesn't work like that. They connect to us.
Okay, well, Colin, we're just going to take a quick break there, so stay tuned, we'll be right back.
Visit themoreshow.co.uk/shop to purchase products and services from your favourite past guests. If you're new to this site, you can also catch up on the previous television and radio shows through YouTube and the More Show website.
Welcome back to the show. I'm joined currently here with Colin Fry, one of the UK's leading psychic mediums. Colin, welcome back.
Thank you.
Now, just before we went to the break there, we were just saying about how you connect with the relative of a dead person or a deceased loved one or friend. Now, if we go see a medium and they say to us, right, I want to connect with such and such Joe Bloggs.
Yes.
You would say, sort of run away from that, would you?
Well, a member of the public, for a start, shouldn't do that. Because if you go to have a meeting with a medium, whether it's a private consultation or whether you go to a presentation that they're doing, you actually should say nothing. You know, it's the medium's job to tell you what they're connecting to. Yeah. And I often say this in my shows, you know, when I'm giving out information and suddenly they say, oh yes, and she did. I said, no. Let me tell you, because if you start saying things to me, you're ruining your own message.
Right.
Let me tell you what it is that's going to be. And if I get to a point where they're showing me something I don't understand, then I'll say to you, do you understand why they're showing me X, Y, Z? It's the problem with a lot of people that go to see a medium working or go for a private sitting is, I'll give you an example. I don't do private sittings anymore because I don't have the time, and I've got a waiting list of over 2 million people, so sadly I can't do them anymore. Well, not at the moment anyway. But when people do write in, either me or my PA or my manager will have to sometimes write back to people and say, thank you so much for contacting us. I regret Colin is not doing private sittings at the moment. However, he couldn't see you anyway because you've told us too much. And I always say for people that want to make an appointment to see a medium, or if they have to phone or email, whatever, all you should be saying is, I would like to have a sitting with you. I would, like to make an appointment with you. And then just go in and sit down. Now, the important thing to remember is, we don't summon them. Mediums do not summon spirit. I think you used the word earlier, we're conduits. We are there, we put the thought out. Anyone, whoever, wants to try and connect through, now's the time to do it. And you might go along to a sitting expecting your mum to come through, but it might be your auntie that comes through.
That's right. And why is that sometimes? Are they not ready to come over and just validate that they're there? Or?
Spirit communicator once said to me, communication for them was like swimming through a sea of jam.
Really, right.
Well, think about it, right? You pass from this life. You have no physical voice. You have no physical body. You are a being of consciousness, holding a form that's quite different to the earthly form. Within spiritualism, we often call it the etheric form. And you've somehow got to work out how to project who you are, what you want to say, what you remember, into the mind of a medium. Now, mediums sometimes might bleat about how difficult it is for us, but you try and imagine how difficult it is for the communicator to transmit who you are and what you want to say into the mind of the medium, and then hope that the medium understands it.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you great examples. There was a great one a number of years ago I saw. I was too young to appreciate just how good this medium was. Only now I do. There's a guy called Joe Benjamin. I was about 14 years old. I was taken to see him demonstrate. And he went to a guy in the audience and he said, "Sir," he said, "I don't quite get it." He said, "I know I've got your father with me, but he's putting all razor blades around your head. But I know you don't want to commit suicide." He said, "Do you understand this?" And the man stood up and he said, with a very heavy French accent, "Yes, Mr. Benjamin, I understand completely. Our family name is Gillette."
What a way to validate it.
But the medium did not understand the full significance of what he was being shown. He just had to say what he was seeing.
Why do they validate it in these ways? I mean, why not just come out straight out with it? Yeah, I'm blah blah, and I'm here to see that person.
Because sometimes they do. But what I've understood is, if for a medium, or if mediumship was so simple that they could just come and stand beside us and talk to us, it would make life a lot easier in the role that we have to perform. But it's very subtle. It's not that precise.
Do you think it's not meant to be that easy? Do you think things aren't meant to be that see-through?
To go along the line of some of the religious groups that say it's wrong because there's meant to be a separation between the world of spirit and the world of the physical. In a way, I sort of agree with them. There is meant to be a separation. And and I think that people like myself are born gifted in the way we are, because I feel our role is to say, come along to one of my evenings, come and have a sitting, whatever. But once you've had that communication, once we've given you, or your loved ones have given you the evidence that they've moved on, they still exist, they are still functioning and living an existence, get on with your life. Move on yourself. Because I often say to my audiences, they are not the ones that have died. Often it's the people that stay behind. They die. They stop living. They stop functioning.
Yeah.
And when I used to do private sittings, I had a rule. You could come to me for a sitting once. If you felt you needed to or wanted to, you could come back again shortly afterwards. Thereafter, if you felt the need to come back, I would not see you for a year.
Yeah, because you need that time just for them to have taken on board the reading.
And they mustn't become dependent.
No.
They mustn't become dependent. The role of the medium is to give evidence
and
then move on.
That's right, and that can happen quite often, doesn't it, with some mediums, where the sitter becomes addicted to listen to what they've got to say, and they're not living their life without free will, are they?
There's nothing wrong with being interested in mediumship and going along to evenings in theatres or spiritualist churches out of your interest in mediumship.
No, that's right.
But if you're constantly going looking for another message, another message, another message. It's actually quite an unhealthy addiction.
And you're not taking responsibility then for your own free will, are you?
Exactly. You know, I've adamantly believed this, that the medium's role is to be a healer, but once the process of healing has started, it is for the sitter to continue that process of healing for themselves.
So in your opinion then, you've done these readings for over 3 decades now or more. What's the purpose in life as far as you see it right now at this point?
I'm going to pinch a phrase from one of my guides. He taught this to me many, many years ago, and it's really been something that has taken me through the last 3 decades. He said, not I or you have the ability to see the destination. He said, because God, however you understand God, is constantly expanding, constantly creating, constantly moving to the horizon. All we can do is to follow. And he said, I no longer care what or if there is a destination. I exist for the joy of the journey. And I think we should all that. We should live for the journey.
And for the now as well.
And not worry about what the destination is. You know, he said to me once, you know, you can set your sights on a far horizon and you can rush towards it. And when you get there, all you will find is another horizon. And what you lost was the journey. Because you're in such a haste to get to the destination.
Well, is there a finish line?
Probably not. Probably not. I mean, there's mixed scientific opinion, you know, about, you know, is the universe, and for me the universe is physical and spiritual. There's mixed scientific opinion. Some people say, you know, it's like an elastic band, it will reach a point where it can't expand anymore and it will collapse back in on itself. There are others that believe that it is in a constant state of expansion. My feeling is, you know, if you think about it, you know, again, using a little bit of religious text here, it says in the Bible, God created man in his own image. Now, I don't believe that I look like God, and I'm sure you don't believe you look like God. No. But if you think of it in a different way, that there's some truth in that. God did, however you understand God, God did create us in his own image. He created us by thought, and we were created to think. In that way, we are in God's image.
Very true, yes.
And then, if you also consider on a scientific level, science says energy cannot die. It can only change form. Our thoughts are energy. And once we've created them, they've got to move on. They've got to expand on. So, you know, I think that, you know, although science may argue the case against the afterlife, I would argue the point that in what they have discovered so far, they've already proved afterlife.
Yeah.
Because if energy cannot die, it can only change form, and we are energy, we cannot die, we can only change form. And whereas we change form, going back to this analogy of, like, you know, what is God, what is if God has created the path, and we're the energy that's meant to travel along the path, we have no choice. We have to follow that, you know, we have to follow that path. And I believe that we are constantly following the light of God, however you understand God.
Do you think we all have the ability, though, to communicate? Do you think there's certain signs that we can see that sometimes we miss the signs?
We can see the signs. I think everyone can see the signs. You've just got to, you used the expression earlier, you just got to think out of the box. You know? You just got to think out of the box. And, you know, if you can think out the box, you can see the signs. Can everybody be mediumistic? Probably not, and nor should they want to be. You know, I used to find this a lot when I used to teach at a certain establishment, that there was far too much encouragement of trying to make everybody believe that they could be a medium. And the sad thing about it was that there was a lot of very spiritual people there, very gifted people there. Now, what's the point in trying to encourage somebody to believe that they can develop, let's say, clairvoyance? And they're about as clairvoyant as a wet paper bag. And all the time you're pushing them to develop something they haven't got, it's going to be to the detriment of something that they have got. And I think that there's got to be a lot more within this spiritual education of saying people don't want to be something that you're not. Don't covet something that you don't have.
Yeah.
Look at what you have
Yeah.
and develop that.
But when I mention signs, though, if if a loved one or a friend, relative, whatever it may be, has passed on, are there certain signs sometimes that they're around?
You know, it's a lady came to me the other day and we were talking and she said, my husband passed at 3:25 in the afternoon on a Thursday. She said, and at 3:25, she said, every week, she said, without fail, this bird comes and taps on my window. She said, is it a sign? And I said, don't ask me, ask yourself, is it a sign? And if you can embrace it as a sign, that's what it is. Nobody else can say, no, that's not what it is. If that's what you feel it is, that's what it is.
Well, Colin Fry, thank you very much for joining us.
You're welcome.
If you'd like to find out more on Colin Fry, go to colinfry.com or visit my site, themoreshow.co.uk, and look up Colin Fry under past guests. Well, until next time, thanks for watching.
If you like what you watch, then don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates on The More Show. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new weekly television and radio shows.